Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all the participants in this webinar on understanding open research, which is part of EURAXESS Africa webinar series in how to get published in collaboration with Tyler and Francis Group. My name is Ahmed Malel. I am associate professor and regional representative for EURAXESS Africa. EURAXESS Africa is an initiative of the European Commission established with the aim to provide free access to information about research in Europe, opportunities for research funding, international collaboration, and transnational mobility. It links research in Africa to Europe. Furthermore, the network is open to all nationalities and research fields. I would like to thank our speaker, Matthew Cannon. Matthew is the head of open research for Tyler and Francis Group. Matt has been working at Tyler and Francis for almost 15 years in variety of editorial roles in both science and social science areas. Matt will provide a broad overview of the key element of open research, while many researchers are familiar with open access publishing. Open research includes a set of practices designed to open up the research process, ensuring great transparency and trust in science. Your questions must be submitted in Slido. Here you can see the QR code of Slido link. The webinar will be recorded and will be available in EURAXESS Africa website as well as the slides. Now I will give the floor to our speaker. So Matthew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'll just share my slides. Can you see those?
Yeah, good.
Okay, wonderful. So good afternoon, everyone. As Ahmed said, my name is Matthew Cannon, and I'm the head of open research for Taylor and Francis based in Oxford in the UK. So thanks for joining this afternoon. The idea of this session is to give you a broad introduction to the main themes of open research, an introduction to some of the activity that's been going on in this space over the last few years. You can see from the agenda that I'll talk about one of the introductory models of open research to give you some more information about what that means, and then go on to talk in a bit more detail about ideas such as data sharing, sharing of code and materials and methods, preprints, open peer review, and also registered reports. And I'll talk more in detail about all of these ideas or tools throughout the course of this presentation. And finally, with some information about increasing credit and transparency in research as well. There'll be plenty of time to ask questions and discuss at the end of the session. So as Ahmed said, please do submit your questions via Slido and we'll be able to answer those at the end of the session. So to start with some very basic definitions, open research is really about moving the conversation past open access to considering how the whole research lifecycle can be opened up. So even if an article is not open access, there are still ways that scientists and researchers can make the research process that they've been through more open. And the key themes of open research are about making the research activity more transparent and working towards reproducibility, which is an idea about a reader being able to read your paper, access any other materials that you've shared, and reproduce or replicate the results of your project. The idea here is that that will speed up findings and accelerate the pace of science and scientific research. So on this slide, you can see a general research workflow. It starts at the top with the generation of an idea. the research process follows on by the researcher generating a hypothesis, so a research question about what they're going to try and study. And that from there, they can design an experiment to test that hypothesis or research question. When they've conducted their experiment, they can create some data and they can interpret that into some results and a conclusion. Once they've finished their project, they have their conclusions. The practice is to write that up into a journal article or some other kind of narrative of what they've been doing. And often that ends up being published in a journal. And currently, this is where the idea of open access comes into play. So it's about making the final version of an article describing the research process available for people to read. And increasingly there are funders, so research funders and institutions and different governments are increasingly making policies around the availability of research papers in this way. And that's all kind of summarized under the open access movement. So what do we mean when we talk about open research specifically? So this is a model that was also created by the European Union through a group called Foster Open Science. And this is the kind of the first model that they created. Firstly, I would say that the language or the terminology that can be used here is a bit broader than just open science. So obviously open science is a key term, but you also may hear people talking about open research or open scholarship as well. And I would say all of those terms are interchangeable. Now, if we move on to the four key pillars that you can see on the model here, the first one is about sharing research data. And the best practice here is that data should comply with the FAIR principles. And if you don't know, FAIR is an acronym that stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I'll talk more about this and data sharing initiatives in the coming slides. Oh, sorry. Secondly, the second pillar is about sharing code. So increasingly researchers are using code and software in different ways as part of their research. Some researchers may be using it to conduct increasingly complex data analysis. It can also be used you might have pieces of computer code that can collect data, and also people may be creating tools using code or software, and those tools would be the output of a research project. So there's quite a few different ways in which researchers are starting to use code. And sharing of code can help with the transparency and the reproducibility of research. Sometimes sharing this code or software is enough on its own. Sometimes it may need to be shared in combination with the data that's been collected to really enable reproducibility. The third pillar we have here is about sharing papers. And I see this as having two parts. So the first part is about sharing of early versions of research papers, otherwise known as preprints. And there's a whole range of community-owned servers, such as arXiv, bioRxiv, medRxiv, psycharXiv, in a range of areas across the sciences, and also into social sciences like the SOC archive and places like Humanities Commons, all allow researchers to upload early versions of their research papers. But it also also refers to open access and the availability of sharing the final version of record as published in a journal. And sometimes this requires payment of an article publication charge. So this is how open access fits under this broader umbrella of open research. And when I talk about open research going further than open access, you can see how they're related. The fourth pillar we have is about the peer review process. So historically, most journals have operated either a single anonymized or a double anonymized review process, but it's felt that to increase transparency, one of the things that can be opened up is by sharing more information about the peer review process that has happened on a specific article. And I can talk more about the various models and different workflows that are being generated under the umbrella of open peer review in a few slides' time. I have a suggested addition to this model, and this is a specific article type, but also a way of doing research that really embodies these open research principles. And this is known as registered reports. If you're not familiar, this is kind of a research workflow or research process that results in the culmination of publication of a specific article type. As you can see on the slide, for this way of working, the peer review process is split up into two parts. So you can see there that somebody would develop an idea, develop a hypothesis, but then send that into the journal to be peer reviewed. And if they get a positive decision, they can go ahead and start their data collection and their work, and then proceed with publication as long as they've undertaken the experiment as they laid out in that first submission. I can talk more about this in a few slides' time, but I think it's quite an interesting idea that has quite a lot of potential for open science research in the future. So now to dive into a bit more detail about the first of those four pillars on data sharing. So I think it's worth spending a little bit of time just talking about definitions of data and what exactly we're talking about here. In the sciences, it's quite usual to think about spreadsheets full of numbers when people talk about data sets, but the definition that we're using here is much more broad. So thinking about things like images, photographs, video, music, survey responses, and annotations would all be classed as research data under this definition. On the slide, you can see a quote from the Handbook of the University of Oxford, which defines data as the recorded information necessary to support or validate a research project's observations, findings, or outputs. So using this definition, most research that would be published would have data attached to it. I think in kind of science and technology and medical areas, what authors and researchers understand what people mean when they talk about data. In areas in the social sciences and humanities, it's a bit less usual to call sources or some of the things I mentioned data in this way, but conversations are evolving, and there has been a lot of work and progress even this year around data sharing initiatives for humanities and social sciences. So if we move on to the next slide. So on this slide, I wanted to give a update on what's been happening at Taylor & Francis around data sharing. So we launched our data sharing policies in 2018 and rolled out further support for authors in 2019. On the slide, on the right-hand side, you can see a chart. This shows that this is the kind of the summary table for the Taylor & Francis data sharing policy. And as you can see, it has 5 levels. All of the journals that Taylor & Francis publish have the option to pick a data sharing policy that best meets the needs of its community and sets the minimum requirements for researchers submitting to that journal on what they need to do with their research data. The first policy is called our basic policy, and it provides a broad encouragement for researchers to share their data when they publish with us, but there's no requirement for them to do so. So it's an encouragement to share. But then as you go through the levels, the requirements become more strict, moving up to an open data policy where authors need to include a data availability statement in their paper, and that statement needs to include a link to a data set stored in an online repository. And there's kind of a range of grades in between those policies. In 2019, we also launched a pilot with our Earth Science portfolio, where we moved 6 journals to the most open data sharing policy to see what the response would be from that community. And earlier this year, we published a case study with the results of that pilot. We were really pleased to say that for the journals that we moved, we saw no impact really on the submissions or the accept rate or the turnaround time for those articles. But I think this is really due to the kind of the position of that community around data sharing, and that it was becoming normalized quite quickly for researchers to be sharing open data in that way. Also, a lot of the data that's used in Earth Sciences is either from satellites, so remote sensing data, or kind of data on topics around climate change, measuring gas, measuring Earth temperatures, and other kind of available data, which is potentially slightly easier to share than some of the medical sciences or psychology, because there is no personal information involved, and there is no GDPR or other legal frameworks to worry about in terms of protecting patient confidentiality. More about my role. So I take an active role in the STM Publishing Association's research data program, and I'm also leading a working group looking at humanities data sharing. There's also work that's happening with other publishing industry groups like Force 11 and COPE, which is the Committee on Publication Ethics, who are creating workflows around guiding publishers and data repositories on some of the ethical issues that arise around sharing data. So I've been involved in those projects as well. So next, I wanted to move on to sharing of code and materials and methods. So across the breadth of science and research, research object outputs can be highly varied. So there's lots of different materials and objects that researchers create that could be shared as part of their making their research process more transparent. And increasingly, researchers are taking advantage of new technology, such as using code, as I mentioned earlier. In science areas, it's more usual to share things like methods or protocols, or use methods and protocols that are available online. But this isn't just the case for medical research, and increasingly in social sciences and humanities, we're seeing more uptake of doing research in this sort of way by researchers who want to make their process more open. And increasingly, humanities and social science research methods create other new kinds of materials that could be really valuable to share online, such as not just the responses to a survey, but the questions that were created and shared as part of that survey as well. So now we're moving on to the third pillar. This was the sharing of papers. I wanted to give again a brief overview of some of the key terms you might find when talking about open access. So this is about the sharing of the final version of research papers. So you may hear people talking about gold open access, and this is where the final version of a research article is shared, and this could either happen in a journal that is completely open access, where every single paper is open, or what we call hybrid journals, where there is still a mix of subscription access and open access papers involved in that journal. Often this is the payment of an article processing charge, article publication charge is required for open access publishing in that way. The second method you may hear about is green open access, and this is very much about sharing and storing earlier versions of a research project. And I mentioned about some of the main preprint servers in the introduction to this session. At this point, I wanted to give a quick reminder about the Taylor and Francis preprint policy, which says that authors can share their original manuscript, which is the version that they submit to peer review, as much as they like, including on social media and on preprint servers, and that sharing a preprint is not considered duplicate publication and will not affect the decision by any of the Taylor and Francis or Routledge journals on whether to put your paper into peer review ahead of publication. For researchers in the life sciences, we have an agreement in place with bioRxiv, which is the main life science preprint server, where if you post your preprint there is the option to do like a one-click submit option into a whole range of journals, and there's a selection of our life science publications in that list. So looking to reduce the amount of admin and take some of the pain away of the article submission process for people who are sharing preprints. So next, I wanted to talk about open peer review. The vast majority of journals at Taylor and Francis still use either single anonymized or double anonymized peer review processes. I'll quickly mention what they are if you're not sure. So double anonymized is when neither the author or the reviewer know each other's identity. And these peer review processes are put in place to try and remove any sort of bias from the review of a manuscript based on knowing the identity of the author. The reviewer's identity is also kept anonymous to protect them and enable the reviewer to write an honest appraisal without fear of any sort of recrimination from the author. In some areas, mainly in science and technology journals, you'll see single anonymized peer review processes, and this is where the author's details are available to the reviewer. The main rationale for this is that research is so specified and research happens in such small communities that often people know who's working on what anyway, and so it's actually the people will know who's doing what, and an anonymous manuscript doesn't really increase the confidentiality of the peer review process that much. But there have been well-documented issues with the peer review process around the fact that it is all completely hidden from the reader, and also some of the issues around timeliness and things as well. So increasingly, as part of the open science and open research movement, there's been calls for more adoption of open peer review practices. However, there is quite a lot of confusion about exactly what constitutes open peer review. And a piece of research that I found really useful was published in 2017 by Tony Ross-Helluer, and he looked at a whole range of workflows and publishers, looking at what they were doing around open peer review, and found over 120 different definitions of things that could ultimately be considered open peer review, but were all quite different. So he then did some work to start to group the various workflows and practices that he saw under some headings, and you can see those 7 headings on the slide here. I'll pull out just a couple of them to give some examples. So in terms of making the identities open, this is where you would just remove the anonymity of the research process, so both the author and the reviewer would be aware of each other's identity. Opening up the reports, so this is where the review reports could be made available alongside the final version of the research paper. This is useful for authors where they can see exactly what comments the reviewers made on the research and how that may have shaped the final version. Also, you can see exactly how much rigor has gone into the peer review process for that article, if you can read the review reports. Then some of the other ones start to become a bit more future looking. So things like open participation, where you could have a whole community contributing to a review process, and things like open interaction, where it actually becomes more of a discussion or a dialogue between the authors and the reviewers to improve that review, to improve that article, rather than just the kind of very formal letters backwards and forwards, which is kind of how most of the review processes take place. But I think my main point here is to just summarize that open peer review is probably the least defined of the open research areas that I've presented today. And so if you've ever been confused when talking about open peer review with a colleague, it's not surprising, because there's so many different things that ultimately could fall under the definition of open peer review that you could be talking about very different things, even though they would both be considered open peer review. So now we're on to my suggested fifth pillar of the open research model, talking more about registered reports. So as I mentioned at the start, the idea of registered reports is that they break up the research process into two parts, and this really is aimed at increasing the transparency of that piece of research and reducing any potential waste in that research process. So as I mentioned, a researcher would develop an idea, then design a study to test it. And at that point, they send it to a journal, and the journal would have an initial peer review of that idea and the hypothesis and the methodology. They can give kind of standard peer review responses. So they can reject the article, they can ask for it to be amended, or they can accept it. And the acceptance is called an acceptance in principle. And once the researchers have an acceptance in principle, they can start the kind of the work of that research, so the data collection and analysis. Then they would write up their study and then go back to the same journal. And the idea is, as long as they've conducted the method as they said they would in the acceptance in principle, regardless of whether the results meet the hypothesis, they'll still proceed with publication. So this is starting to introduce the concept of publication of negative results. This can also increase transparency because that stage one acceptance in principle can also be published or shared in a repository. So by working in this way, the workflow is really shifting the focus to the research question and your methodology rather than the results that you find. Currently Taylor and Francis offer this on a whole range of journals. Mostly this is focused and centered in the psychology subject area, but we are seeing increased uptake in areas like education and sports science too. The main reason that we see such uptake in psychology is around the year 2010, there was a whole range of, reports of unethical research practices, people fabricating data, manipulating data to have a positive correlation in their results in order to get in order to publish their research. And the idea here is that it removes the temptation for unethical research practices, data manipulation, in order to increase the number of publications that a researcher can achieve. So that's why we think this is so exciting, especially in combination with some of the open data policies before. This is has a lot of potential for growth in the future. So now I wanted to come back to the research workflow that I showed right at the start. And over the last few slides, I've talked also about sharing data, about sharing materials, about methods and code, and also about registering the hypothesis as part of a registered reports workflow. And so hopefully you can see how this definition of open research really starts to open up the entire research process rather than just focusing on the availability of a journal article as a kind of a narrative description of what's happened in a research project. So next, I wanted to introduce a workflow that really is adopting and setting best practice for all of these open science practices. So this is the workflow for F1000 Research, which is a publication platform. It used to be standalone, but Taylor and Francis bought F1000 Research in 2020. So it's been as part of Taylor and Francis for the last couple of years. I think the best way to show how this workflow embodies open research principles is just to talk you through how the submitted manuscripts progress to publication, and you'll see how all the key parts I've talked about are involved. So it starts with article submission via the publication website, and then it moves to the in-house team, and they carry out a whole series of checks on that manuscript, making sure that all the editorial guidelines have been adhered to, all the conflicts of interest and any other statements have been made in accordance with the kind of research that it is. Once those checks have been completed, it's normally quite quick, a few weeks or a month even, that article is published online, and F1000 Research has an open data policy. So within a few weeks, your article can be published and the data that you've collected is linked to it and available via a repository of your choice. And once that's available, the open peer review process begins. The open peer review process for F1000 involves the in-house editorial team selecting reviewers. So reviewers are invited to review the manuscript and write their reports. But as the reviewers' reports are received, they're hosted online next to the manuscript. So when you're looking on the platform, you can see the publications and you can also see who the reviewers are and read the review reports all from the same page. But then as the 2 reviewers or 3 reviewers have completed their review reports, the authors then have a chance to revise the manuscript, kind of as you would in a normal peer review process. But then if they submit a revised version, that is also published as part of the same package almost. So when you're looking at a paper, you can see if there's been multiple versions, and you can read all the review comments and see how the review comments have shaped the manuscript through the review process. So all of the information through the review process is transparent. So through this platform, you kind of have an early version sharing, a bit like a preprint. You have open data and you also have open peer review. So if you haven't seen the F1000 Research platform, I'd encourage you to go and have a look and see how they do it, because I think it looks really nice. So finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about increasing credit and transparency, as these are key themes of the open research movement. So one of the things that we've been doing at Taylor & Francis is introducing the availability of open science badges. So this is another initiative of the Centre of Open Science, again, kind of heavily linked with the psychology subject area, but is applicable for anything. They've created 3 badges. So one is for open data, one is for open materials, and the third is for pre-registration of research. And for journals that offer these badges, when papers are submitted and then accepted, the authors are prompted or asked if they would like to claim a badge for their research. For example, if they've shared their data, they could provide the link to the data in the repository. And when the article is published, this badge, the open data badge, would appear on the article. The idea here is that it makes it more clear to readers that there is a data set attached, an open data set attached to that piece of research, which might help them go and find it and interrogate that, but also could potentially increase the trust or the impact of that research, knowing that there is an open data set behind it. These are applied at article level and appear in multiple places. So if you're looking at some search results on Taylor & Francis Online, you would see the badges for papers that have that open data set available. Also, if you're looking at a specific journal and looking at the table of contents or the latest articles, you would also see clearly if there are badges, materials, or if it was pre-registered from those pages too. We feel like this really aligns with the mission of DORA. So if you don't know what that is, that's the Declaration on Research Assessment that's been around for a few years now and is really pushing for a change in research practice and research assessment, where articles and research are based on their own merits and not on the metrics of the venue where they're published. And this really aligns with the mission of open research about increasing transparency of the research and the impact that has on the authors and the researchers that conducted it. So that's the end of the presentation that I've got for you today. I hope you can see how I've given a kind of an introduction to the open research movement, some of the key tools and options that are available to you as researchers when thinking about making your research process more open, such as sharing data, sharing code, sharing early versions of your work as a preprint, or making the final version available via open access. Also, given a bit of a definition around open peer review, as that's one of the least defined areas, and also introduced the concept of register reports, a new way of doing research research that can really increase the transparency and reduce waste in the research process. So yeah, I see we've still got plenty of time for questions, so happy to hear from the audience. Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Matt. It is very clear, very great presentation. So we have received many questions. So if you have more questions, please use the slide link as already mentioned and share it in the discussion. So if you want, I will go one by one for the questions. So I think for the first question, so the first question, do I have to pay to open access journals?
So for Taylor and Francis, normally, yes. So normally there is a charge for publishing open access. Not all of the journals, some of the open access journals we have are sponsored. So maybe a society or a research funder pays in advance for their awardees or for society members and things to have their publications made available. But often there is a charge, yes.
Yeah, okay. So we have many questions. So for the second question, what are the difference between open access and standard subscription-based publication?
So the differences is only in the availability of that content for readers. So all of the journals we publish have the same peer review process, they have the same submission process, they're all held to the same standards. The difference is at the point of publication. So if you, as a reader, you arrive at a subscription-based journal, you will have to enter a username and password, or you have to be logged into your library, your university library, because they may have bought a subscription or have a deal with Taylor and Francis that allows you to have access to the content of that journal. For open access, there is no subscription, there is no fee for access. The fees are the article publication charges that are paid for by the authors, but that means that it's free for anybody to read online as a reader. I think increasingly we don't expect authors to have to pay these article publication charges. We increasingly have deals with university libraries or with governments or with funders, and they are paying the article processing charges on behalf of their staff or authors.
Okay.
In terms of, there's another difference, which is around licensing. So in subscription-based journals, the copyright or the licensing of the article may be with the publisher or with the society who owns the journal. So Taylor and Francis publish lots of journals on behalf of learned societies around the world. And so the rights in those articles may be held by the society. For open access publication, we use CC Creative Commons licenses, which allow for more reuse of those articles in an easier, simpler way. So there's less licensing and restrictions around the open access articles compared to the subscription ones.
Good. Okay. So we have another question. What are the benefits of open access?
So I think, as I mentioned just then, the accessibility to the research is key. So obviously, if the research is behind a paywall, only the staff members at universities that have subscriptions can access and read that material. Obviously, some journals publish thousands of papers every year and have been going for a long time. There's a large archive, and so the subscription fees to those journals are very, very high. And so new universities, developing countries cannot always afford the subscription fees for all the journals that they might want. Whereas open access shifts it around, so the authors pay those fees and then anybody can read the content. So yeah, it's really about dissemination of research across the world. Anybody can read it. Also, if you think about certain subject areas like medicine, for example, I realize a lot of medicine research is written for other clinicians or other specialists, but there is some medical research that is written more for patients. And obviously, open access allows patients and patient support groups and charities to also be able to access that research and make use of it rather than just people affiliated with universities. Same goes for other research that might influence policy. Policymakers could also have access in areas like climate change or education or other areas like that.
Okay, so there is a specific question. I've written a paper related to waste management and circular bioeconomy, and I want to publish for open access journal. So how much of charge I need to pay? Just there is.
What would be the charge for publishing?
Yeah. I think the question
So,
Tyler and Francis.
So we don't have a set fee. So the journal, so I think you would have to find a journal that meets the criteria for your research. Taylor and Francis have nearly 3,000 journals in different subject areas. And we have a range of pricing depending on the size of the journal, the quality, a whole range of issues. So if you find a journal that you want to publish in, the pricing for open access will be clearly available on the website as a whole range of pricing. So yeah, it's quite hard for me to say exactly what the price would be. Also, depending on where you are, we subscribe to a whole, I think the World Bank have a list of waivers. So certain countries, including some in Africa, are eligible for 50% or 100% waivers. So, but only for full open access journals. So if you find an open access journal you want to publish in and you're from a country that's eligible for a waiver, you could get a discount on that. So it's worth checking. It's all available via the Taylor and Francis Author Services site.
Okay, so we will give the possibility to open the mic for Sabrina Bayaza. Sabrina, you can ask your question. Sabrina?
She's on mute.
Yeah, I think. So if you want to give your question, we can give this possibility to open the mic. So we have, I think in slide we have the another question. So on data sharing, what ethical framework is being used to prevent exploitation?
What ethical frameworks are there to reduce exploitation? Yeah, so I think it is a concern by researchers when sharing their data that it could be used in different ways. Obviously, as a researcher, you should choose where and when to share your data, what data you share, and often. Oh, is that Sabrina?
This Sabrina?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Question? Yeah.
Finally, okay. So go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just you want to ask a question?
No, it's excellent. Yeah. No.
Okay, Matt. So I think
yes, data sharing.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, and so yeah, you can kind of choose the best venue and what to share. Also, when you upload your data to a repository, there'll be normally a whole range of licenses and things that you can apply to that data that can control how people will use it once it's been posted. So you can use the Creative Commons 0 or CC BY licenses that allow anybody to use it in any way, but you can also restrict it by using non-commercial or non-derivative licenses, or even copyright, so you can hold all the rights to that data if you wish. Some journal policies may require certain open licenses, but yeah, those options are available to you. I think also there is a concern by some people that people will take and use their data and try and publish on it before they're ready. But I kind of feel like if you put your data in a repository and the data is then time-stamped and it has your name and your affiliation and your metadata attached to it, if there is any query about how that data has been used in the future, it's really clearly marked that it's your data when you posted it, and that the other person may be using it after you posted it. So to me, it feels like if that were to happen, there would be lots of clear evidence that it's your data and that you created it, and that any potential person who used it in a different way would be in the wrong. So yeah, and so yeah, I think does that answer the question?
Okay, just here our last question. How long should the publishing process normally take? So,
yeah, so I think it's quite, it can vary a lot by journal, also on the kind of changes that are required to make as part of a manuscript. I think normally if we can talk very generally, but if you submit to a journal, most editors now will do an initial check, and normally within a few days, they will make a decision if it's likely to be published in the journal, and they may desk reject some papers within just a few days if it's not a good fit for the subject, or they think it's unlikely to meet the quality threshold for the journal. They may reject it after just a few days. But then if it goes into the peer review process, the reviewers normally get a couple of weeks to read the manuscript and make their comments. But sometimes it can be editors can struggle to find reviewers. So if it takes them maybe a week or even 2 weeks to find 2 or 3 reviewers, then that can add to that time. Then if the reviewers come back and there are only small changes to be made to that manuscript, then as an author, you'd get a couple of weeks to make those changes, and then it can proceed to publication quite quickly. However, if you get sort of a major revision, lots of changes to be made, you might get more time, maybe a month, maybe 3 months in order to make those changes. And then it may go out for a fuller review again, which might take another 5 or 6 weeks. You may be asked to make more changes. And then the peer review process could end up taking a few months easily. So yeah, it's quite hard to give specifics around exactly how long it will take. One thing I will say is for Taylor and Francis journals now, when you're looking at the homepage of the journal that you would like, that you're interested in, there is a metrics tab, and it will give you a kind of an average publication time or turnaround time. So when you found a journal you're interested in, you can see a bit more about the average turnaround times for that specific publication on the journal website. And I think they're updated every few months, so should be relatively up to date.
Okay, so thank you. I think we have many questions related to certification. So if there is possibility to prepare a certification of participation of all attendees, I think we can see this point together, Matt.
Okay.
Okay, to encourage our attendees to get a certificate for this webinar. So I think actually just I will inform you about our webinar. So save the date. I will share my screen just to
okay.
Okay. Okay, so save the date. our next webinar in 17th of November related to Horizon Europe, opportunities for sub-Saharan African countries. So all details are already in our website of EURAXESS Africa website. Today, for this webinar, I think it will be available, the recording video, it will be available on our EURAXESS Africa website. So I think there is okay. Thank you a lot, Matt, for this great presentation. And then I think we will arrange another webinar because we have a webinar series in collaboration with Tyler and Francis. So thank you very much, and goodbye, and thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Cheers.